All right, my man Brian Young. Let's start with your quote. I think this is actually really a great one. It's really reflective of. It's from the Bible, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Always starting with this. What does this mean to you, my man?
Man, it is really honestly my life verse. To be honest with you, I have lived my life in such a way that I've gotten to do some things that are just insane, and one of which it kind of began with mission work, and then it turned into getting in the Ironman world where I raced for 8 years, and to the point when I turned 50. I had had a tattoo on my phone that I bragged to the youth group that I led and my family and who else would listen about kind of this tattoo represented my life, not in the moment thinking it was associated directly to John 10:10. Well, when I got home after having coffee and donuts with a buddy on my 50th, two of my daughters, my youngest, were at home and said, "Hey, Dad, here's the deal. It's time to put up or shut up. You're getting the tattoo today." And I'm like, "What are y'all talking about?" They grabbed my phone. They said, "This picture, which now sits right here on my arm, it says, I want to thrive, not just survive." And so they took me
Mm.
to a tattoo parlor while my wife was out of town, and it appeared on my arm. And through a friend who I've mentored, who's a drummer for couple Christian bands, he got word to John Foreman because John Foreman is Switchfoot. This is from their album, so I kind of got permission, but really not. But
What's
that
it like
verse,
to What's it like to have some daughters that really are in tune with what you're about? And let me cue that up just a little bit more.
mhm,
So one of the things for Feel Good Fathers and for fatherhood in general is you've done a great job when your family knows what you're about. They understand your values, they understand your principles. And
yeah,
so you've created this family, you've raised your daughters in such a way that they're like, all right, that's what my dad's about. It's his
mhm,
birthday. Let's make this happen.
yeah.
Let's walk through some of the contributing pieces there that are going to help because this is really going to lead into our overall discussion of helping dads thrive.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think one of the things for men is we deal with pride and a lack of humility. And I had to learn very quickly as a father, specifically for daughters, like they need to know the why just as much as a business partner or a colleague or your bride needs to know the why. And so, between the mixture of them understanding the why dad does the things that he does, but also realizing that I could show him what the Bible looks like on the countertop, or I could take him to church. But if I didn't emulate what I was coming out of my mouth and living it out, then they would not have a real understanding of how you take those words into action. And so from the young age, we focused on that. But as to your point, Jay, they asked me to go get a tattoo that they knew I wanted to get, but it represented me. And so it's just emulating to your kiddos how they should act.
I think also having that love and affection to allow for that contribution to your life, I
Hmm.
think that's something that is quite understated for
Yeah.
fathers. That in some circles, and I'm still personally reconciling this idea of running the house like a business, that whole kind of element there.
Yeah.
I heard about the idea of the family executive dinner meeting or whatever, where you have your kids are contributing to the house, and it kind of flies in the face of some of the things that I believe about. The parents are we are the authority figures, we're the leaders of the home, and
Hmm.
how much contribution. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about this part?
Yeah, absolutely. So, number one, your kiddos do not need more friends. They've got enough friends, hopefully at school and at church and the neighborhood. So, you're not their friend. And I don't mean that from a negative state, right? But what your kids do need is they need an authoritative figure. They need someone that sets the bar, that holds that bar for themselves, right? So they can see, much like we just talked about, right? And then also but also have a contributing factor to the family. I mean, we would have family meetings. I mean, we would try to sit down, we'd have dinner together, we'd discuss hard stuff, we'd talk about highs and lows, which could lead to bigger discussions. So the girls knew they had
Hmm.
input into the family, but they all didn't realize that they, kind of ran the family kind of thing. And so it was definitely a back and forth, but they understood that at the end of the day, yes, mom and dad were the authoritative figures, but they knew the why behind we chose the decisions we chose. And what's cool is they got older, they understood exactly why they made the choices that they made, because that was
Mm.
part of those discussions when they were younger. So it really
I,
contributed
I
to the
think
health of the
that
family.
that part I think is amazing. That whole idea of being able to teach that reflective thought. I think of there's a lot of discussion today on critical thought. I personally think teaching, like, I think this is something that all generations have dealt with. I don't think it's a unique situation right now. The
Yeah.
technology profile might change, the media landscape might change, but I think just in general, having people reflect in the moment and being able to pause and create space and
Hmm.
understand why they're making decisions that they're making, that is one of the core leaders and core contributors to an individual's success. I've been reading a lot about, I'm in a Stoic Leadership Challenge right now, one of Ryan Holiday's elements, and
Hmm.
one of his little challenges. And they're talking a lot. The theme actually on the podcast of all my interviews this week has been on this core idea of responding versus reacting.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that they're related, but I don't think they're necessarily directly related. Probably like in a parallel. What are your thoughts on that piece?
Yeah, I tried to help my daughters understand, because I practice this in business, and you can look at it as, I need to sit on the other person's side of the table, right? Sit next to them to see the view that they see. I
Mm,
also relate it to, it's a 360 view. If you have multiple people having conversations, everyone's going to have a different viewpoint as to their own reality of the thing everyone's looking at. Um, and so we would have conversations about, they would have a situation where someone would do something to them, or they be a part of a situation in a friendship relationship. And we would talk about, well, how does that feel to them? Or tell me about their backstory to help understand not only the way you like responded or you felt what you received, but also think about, well, why did they say what they said? And I will say a lot for me, being a father of four daughters, was the fact that I would always go back to a central theme of, tell me about their relationship with their father. And that right there could tell you a myriad of things as to why that person responded or acts a certain way, or characteristics are not becoming of the person that they say they are, that person says they are. So it's really trying to understand the other person versus you just having this dogmatic view of this is how the world is, kind of thing.
mm.
So,
I think there we're talking about authoritative versus um, helpers.
yeah.
I read this. I've been reading through this really great article. So in scientific study psychology, there's, oh, I'm going to really butcher this, so please forgive me, podcast and YouTube world. Um,
Yeah.
there is this idea where you're reading through multiple studies, and it's this, and you're referencing the similarities between hundreds of studies. So it's and I totally forget about what it's called, but it's about parenting, and
Hmm.
it was kind of like breaking apart some of the commonly held beliefs about nature, nurture, genetic influence, all this kind of
Wow.
stuff. And, it kind of debunked some of the elements of like twins, because most of the parenting study has to do with twins,
Hmm.
because the genetic profile of both of the offspring is the same. And so you can solve for nature versus nurture. Because if it was nature, DNA,
Hmm.
then they would always end up the same. But we've kind of learned that, like, while there are certain elements that are similar, twins by and large usually have a different nurture
Yeah.
influence. And all of this comes down to that if both parents have a college degree, chances are super likely that the offsprings will have a college degree. If
Right.
both parents have a business, odds are that the kids will have a business. Um,
Absolutely.
but where it really came down to, and I think really related to what you were saying, this idea that the emotional intelligence and teaching your kids empathy by doing the simple, direct thing, and this is within the first 4 years of life, picking them up when they cry, that has the biggest influence on their success later in life. And that's one example, but it's really
Right.
that empathy and showing them emotion. So I think that this is let's unpack this and what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree. It's interesting because if you look at the dynamics of, let's say, I didn't have twins, but I had four daughters that were packed in 18 months apart, right? So they had the same parents. They didn't necessarily have the same experience, meaning maybe my job was different. I traveled a lot during one season and not so much of the other, or because the first one got the full attention, quote, of my wife and I versus the second, the third, the fourth, right? So the nurturing side of the environment they grow up in could be different, right? We're in different homes. I mean, heck, a couple of girls, grew up or started the life in a home in one city, but the next thing you know, we're in another. The next two come. Well, the next thing we're living in a 500 square foot barn apartment on 500 acres and starting a youth camp, and so things had changed, right? But you try to stick to the core throughout all of it as to what do we believe, what do we practice, and from that emanates how do we treat people, how do we treat each other. But there's also this openness as to how each one was experiencing being parented by us, and if people happen to get a copy of my book, Thriving Girl Dad, you'll notice the reason I put each daughter stated something back to the chapter, which is really speaking to the dad, was because if you read it, you're going to feel like it is a different experience. You hope to find a thread of me and my wife through it, but because of age, where we lived, whatever, you're going to hear from them something a little bit different, which goes to your point as to, yeah, you could be even twins and DNA is lined up, but then you start adding these other factors, it changes not only the experience, but also changes what they go towards as they grow up, especially when they choose a profession or education prior to their profession. So, and that's the uniqueness of having multiples and then also having them that close together. So it definitely does have an effect. And it's fun to watch at my side because mine are 21 to 26 now, right? I can decipher did my experiment work or not. you know, it's pretty cool to look at.
I think that's it. I I think that's it. I think that looking at like um, as a former game developer, I think sometimes of parenting as a Rube Goldberg machine. There's
Mm-hmm.
like all these weird doohickeys and gadgets that we're setting up, and we're pushing the ball through the thing, and it's like an OK Go video, right? Where it's like
Mm-hmm.
the ball is being bounced or some crazy antics are happening, and then at the end of it, we're like, well, was the video cool? Like,
Yeah.
did these 2 decades work?
Yeah.
I love that you've kind of bridged the gap here between your children's experience of you and really what this thriving dad is.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really love to know sort of your background, how you support men, how you support fathers, and let's
Yeah.
jump into that part of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So because of a life that I've been able to live, now I'm age of 54, which happened a couple weeks ago. you know, Early on, I had a gentleman come to me by the name of Robert Turner, and this is going to get along the lines of kind of my launch pad. And it was one of these things of, you need to make a decision, what you're going to stand for. Are you going to stand for what the word says and what God calls you to be as a father, as a leader? Or are you going to do and emulate what the world says and just fall into what the world emulates and shows you to be or do, right? And some of the stereotypical roles was like a dad, like, well, I'm a dad, but then you know what? I've got a job to do and I've got golf to go play or whatever. And my wife can fall into her roles, right? She's going to cook and she's going to do this or that. But in that moment where this friend of mine says, you got to choose, I started choosing and have come to this realization that I was not designed just to muddle through, right? To the day, today you are birthed until the day you die. It's not a muddle fest. There should be with intent and there should be understanding of the talents you have. And I have a formula that I tell anybody, and I've been telling my daughters they could repeat is what has God gifted you in specifically? What are you really, really good at? It's natural. What are the things that you're really passionate about? Like if I threw a heart monitor on you right now and I said, hey, Jay, tell me about something you're passionate about. I could watch your heart rate rise, right? And then in that
Mm.
becomes your purpose. And so your purposes, though, and some of these passions could change as you move along the trajectory of life. But when I started realizing like I need to be on purpose, I need to choose things that I'm really good at, that I'm passionate about. And some of those things were like things that I naturally saw, but a lot of those things were like challenges from fellow brothers that said, "Hey, I told a story this week at church. I got to teach our men's Bible study at church, and it was fantastic. It was over Judges 7 and 8. It talks about Gideon, and Gideon not saying that he had the ability to do what God was asking him to do, and that's take out the Midianites with only 300 warriors, right? Well, I kind of ended my
Mhm.
message with, guys, I need you to pull out your phones and put down something that you feel challenged by that you said I can't do. Well, the point is you can't do it, right? But with the power of the Holy Spirit, you can do anything. And so that even related to how I ended my talk this week was about my Ironman experience. Like I didn't know what Ironman was. I didn't know what you had to do it. I had no idea what kind of pain you're going to go through. But I watched a buddy do it on TV. He was going across the finish line. Well, that clicked something as, okay, I gotta attack this. And then you go find somebody that knows how to do it, someone to train you in it. You bring people along with you to inspire them, hopefully to do great things. Maybe not what I was doing, but maybe something different in their life. And so and then from there, I could tell stories, but just making that decision literally late 20s, early 30s, at 30, is this isn't just something, as I told my wife, I said, a merry-go-round only goes around once, and that's your life. And so, what are you going to do with it? Right. And so I just said, okay, there's a lot of things I'm not capable of in here, but the power inside of me that's in here. And that has led me to a life that has where I look back and go, I can't believe I got to do that. Right. So it's just, but it's a theme. Um, to the point it's on my arm to remind me that's the theme of my life, right?
Feel Good Fatherhood really began because I was working with this exceptional woman. Her name is Denise, and she speaks at cans and goes around to these amazing companies and helps them with their DI efforts and provides illumination into what they're doing and all that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember through our discussion, really the challenge was why are you bothering? Why does this show exist? Why are we having this conversation? And it really came down to, my belief. It's like fathers are important, men are important, and we don't have a really good avenue to communicate that to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking about how do we define greatness? How do we define legacy? And how do we create distinction between the access to information that we have today of being able to
Mm-hmm.
constantly looking at people that are changing the global landscape.
Yeah.
I think of like Elon Musk today. It's like, look, he's doing things that's changing the landscape. There are
Yeah.
people everywhere that are doing things that are changing the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think for most of us, and I think for the father, that it comes down to when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror at night, like, are you satisfied with what you've done? Have you
100%.
given it your all?
Yeah.
As you're saying, are you challenging yourself? Are you fulfilled? Created have you created a person in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
someone that you can be proud of?
Yeah.
And I love that idea because I think that so often we allow ourselves to be defined from the outside in.
100%.
We allow other people, society, whatever it happens to be, to say this is who you got to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you would agree with this. That's not thriving.
Not at all.
That's surviving.
It's
That's
surviving
you're
and trying to
surrendering everything. Go
it's
ahead,
trying
buddy.
to measure up to a
Hmm.
society's standards is what you're trying to do. And I've been, preaching and teaching this to whoever will listen, the fact that we have an audience of one, right? We have an audience of
Right.
one, and we were created for that audience, for God, and we're to emulate that the best we can, understanding that we have fallacy, like we're not going to be the perfection. But what the world says is you're not successful unless you have perfection, and even when you get to that perfection of the world, it's like, well, welcome, but there's the next level. You're not there yet, kind of thing. And so, to your point, it's in perspective of in the midst of the way you feel like you're tooled and built, that you're reaching new heights and seeking ways to grow. In that, though, if you're humble about what's going on and you are clear about how it's being accomplished, and it's not you, because the world is all about you. I did this, right? but I try to make it
Mhm.
where I hopefully inspire others, right? So if I'm thriving, not just surviving, people will see something different in me. And then I can tell them as to where I got this ability, right? But also I can hopefully inspire them, just like I did this week and said to a group of 100 men, hey, what are you even thinking about, right? What would you like to do? Because there might be things they're thinking, I
Mm.
just can't, there's no way, I can't see forward. The advantage that I have at my age versus most of the people in that room, and even you, let's say, right? I'm older, so I've experienced more, and I've seen the beauty and the gifts of God in my life, to where I look back and see these things. And instead of what it says in Judges, where after all the winning, Gideon takes an ephod. Well, I pulled up my what could be my ephods, Jay, and it was my 4 medals from my Ironman races. And the funny thing was, is I had to go find
Mm.
them. I didn't know where they were. Why? Because they were not my ephod. That was an experience that I was given.
Mm.
It's a part of my story, but I don't need to hold them up as this is who I am, right? This is just a part of my story, kind of thing. So, and you had asked me a question I didn't fully answer, and that was like, how do I do this as far as men, like to help them? I'm always open. I always make space in my calendar if a man says to me, hey, I need help with X. So I've always got an ear and a calendar that leans into assisting and coming beside people, because I didn't get to where I am without people coming beside me. And then I'll be honest, I'm a little bold at times where I see somebody that I realize that they might need a little bit of assistance, or maybe their spouse says something, or maybe because my eyes on a college student or in youth ministry years past, I kind of realize maybe I should become friend with that person. I have this natural heart for serving and helping men thrive. So I kind of seek those opportunities. And so, I mean, that's obviously one of the catalysts for the book, is because I just want to see guys thrive. And the book is beyond just thriving girl dad, right? Like my main focus, let's be honest, is about the young ladies. I want to see them thrive in life. Well, if the dad doesn't assert themselves in the role that they've been given, then the girls do not have a model as to how are they going to thrive. And a bigger picture for the men is you can thrive as dad, as business owner, as cyclist, as artist. I mean, and in your head, you're thinking, no way, I can't do all of that. Oh, yes, you can. You know, you just got to prioritize, set a game plan together, get a coach, whatever, and get to it is all you need to do. Quit making excuses.
Yeah, and quit being distracted. I think that's the other big thing,
That's
right? That's
exactly.
that's something that I've absolutely loved about all my time here with I mean all of you, and being able to surround myself with people that are giving back in this specific way. It's
Mm-hmm.
when your when your mission to serve is clear, everything else just it just I mean the rest of that saying is, well, when your mission to serve is clear, the fear goes away. However, specifically, distraction is how we numb the fear, imposter
Mm-hmm.
syndrome, the insecurity, the
Yeah.
uncertainty of stepping out and being bold and doing what's natural to us. And that's
Yeah.
for men and women, both.
Yeah.
So
Keep
I
keep them.
absolutely love that.
Here's my the way I put it is, and I say this even in my business, is keep the main thing the main thing. And if you do
Mhm.
that, you build plans around the main thing, right? And it's amazing if you could do that. And you see things happen because there's that focus, right? You just got to choose those few things you want to focus on and figure out in each one, how am I going to be able to achieve that thing? Not always easy, but it can be done.
So when you're, I love what you said about actively seeking other men to help, actively seeking other men to mentor and disciple.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Galloway was on Real Time with Bill Maher, right? And Scott
Mm-hmm.
Galloway is this billionaire dude. He's exceptional in every single way. His newsletter is amazing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he talks about what do men need to do to step up. And it's like, and really the measure of man that he expressed, which I thought was really fantastic, was, can you and are you capable of mentoring other men that are not of your blood? They
Mm,
are somebody else's son. Are you helping them thrive? And
yeah.
that's really, if we're able to do more of that in our generation, as we're older, as we've accomplished the things that we want to accomplish, are we able to help and translate our experience into wisdom for somebody else
Hmm.
to get that way forward, to have a simpler path to accomplish what it is that they want to do? Because I personally think the biggest disservice that we do as a society to each other is force everybody else to start at zero.
Yeah.
I think
100%.
it just sucks.
There's Listen, time's been going on for however many years, right? And there's only certain ways that the evil one is going to trip up a man. Okay, so he's not that smart. He's got the same old processes, right? Distraction. You already said it. That's number one. So you're exactly right. So with that said, why would we not, as men, and even for women, right? Why would you not look at the generation, let's say, around you, before you,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, how can I help? And let's be honest. I mean, I got into middle school ministry, then high school ministry, then college ministry, men's ministry, for all the purposes of the fact that I wanted to be inspired by those that I'm with, because even though I'm, quote, the mentor, not the mentee, I can learn from that other
Mm-hmm.
person. And I try to make it clear that when I'm speaking of the things that I've gotten to accomplish or the things that I've learned, it's not, and it doesn't put me in a position of pious where I'm above you. It just puts me in a position of different experiences. And what I want to tease out of the individual is, hey, there's experiences in your life that you can also teach me. So don't ever look at this Brian and you. It's us just sitting at the coffee shop back and forth having conversation. You might have approached me to say, I want to talk about marriage. Well, okay, let's talk about marriage, but you might teach me a little bit of something about finance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there might be an 80-20 rule in this deal where I'm really the one giving more because that's what we're seeking. But I agree wholeheartedly. And what I also say, I hear people, my generation, maybe younger, specifically older, and I've done an experiment sitting outside of a coffee shop in New York where my daughters live and just listen to people talking. And I heard people complaining about things. And I said, and I engaged this one of these gentlemen, and I said, well, what's going on? And I find out even the fact that he's involved in a local church. And you would think, well, you've got all the reason in the world to be positive. But then he starts talking about how negativity towards this generation. And I was like, well, how about you spend time with people younger and realize that you need to be inspired by this generation, because there's a lot of people out there doing great things. One of my best times of years, my wife's at youth camp at Pine Cove Christian Camps, where she's the nursing director. And I get to go and sit at the end of the week where these kids are giving the stories of what happened. And I'll send a message most every time and go to anybody that's following me, we need to tap into this generation. We need to share these ideas with them and then be inspired by them. So it's a cycle, right? And we need to serve each other in that cycle, right? Leave some great things behind that people can learn from, for sure. So I love the way you approach it and why you've got this podcast to do that.
I really think that leading from the front is something that's critical to Feel Good Fathers, something critical to me and my message, and sort of what I want to leave to the world, and what I really want to. I dislike using the word empower here, but empowering people
Hmm.
to do is just
Yeah.
lead from the front. The entire time you were thinking, I was just like, what are the big analogies that we use to explain the phenomenon that we're talking about? I think our role as elders in general is to help people
Hmm.
build bigger cups. Our responsibility isn't to fill the cup, which is that motivation, not inspiration, but that motivation, the um, helping them do things. I would say the 90s and 2000s helicopter parent was I'm going to make sure that the cup is always full, right? Everybody gets a
Yeah.
ribbon kind of thing, as opposed to,
Yep.
well, if you have a bigger cup and you build somebody with a bigger cup, they have way more to give.
Hmm.
And I think that like it's critical for us as fathers to be able to do that, not only for our family. I think a lot about what's happening in my life right now. I'm tampering some of my efforts because my wife is building her business. And so
Hmm.
I know it's like, oh, I've got all of this stuff happening here for me. and all this knowledge that I have, it's like, well, the person who I am most uniquely positioned to serve right now is
Yeah.
my wife and help her accomplish her dreams. And that's really given me a lot of purpose and meaning and fulfillment as far as, wow, like I now get to take these decades of experience that I have and just help somebody create their dream. And I love it. And it's absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, and here's the deal on this journey as well is you got to be very intuitive as to what your priorities are, right? Who are you serving? And it's easy, and you can talk about like pastors, people talk about, maybe the pastor's family is the most jacked up family because the pastor's always serving other people, right? And we could
Right.
emulate that or look at that on and lay over our own lives is to say, and to your point, you're very astute. I mean, I would call that wisdom, right? You kind of look around the situation and say, well, I would like to accomplish X, Y, and Z, but my bride is wanting to accomplish things as well. So you've got to look at the season of life and say, well, okay, I can only do so much. Like I'm going to do this much of what I'm trying to accomplish, but serve her in such a way that I could do this much for her to accomplish, right? I mean, an example out of my own life was when I was in Ironman world and I raced for 8 years. Well, I had my schedule and I would print it out and I would show it to my wife every Sunday. And I would say, babe, this is what I need to accomplish. She knew the number of weeks to the race. She knew what I need to accomplish to train for these races, right? They take a year to get ready for. But I realized in the moment is like, I want you to look at my schedule. I want you to morph it where it serves our family best, knowing in my head, well, guess what? You're not going to become a world champion. And that's okay because in the same language, I want to be a world champion to my daughters, to my community, to the people I served in my church, the people I served at work. And so it's a balance, right? Because anything you do in life is an exchange. If you get a promotion, I'm going to exchange more of my time for more money. I'm going to exchange more time away from my family for more time at work. And it's this back and forth
Mm.
exchange. And you've got to decide as a man, what am I willing to give up to achieve what I want to achieve? And if your priority is being a father and being a great husband, well, guess what? You might not. Now, I do believe, as you can already tell, like I believe you can thrive in different areas, but you need to be very cognizant of you've got multiple places you need to be thriving. So temper that as to how much energy and don't be disappointed to say, well, great, I don't get to be a world-class athlete in my 30s and 40s. You know what? Maybe that's okay. And it is okay, but maybe later in life there's something else that God's got set aside where, i.e., my instance, writing a book I would have never dreamed of. And so it's just seeking, where am I? Right? Don't get wrapped up in you in your head. You got other people you need to influence. And that's part of serving others. When people need your help, don't go, well, I'm building my stuff. Heck, you could build your own stuff and help somebody else at the same time. That's more fun than doing it all by yourself.
I think back to, we've talked a lot about the Bible here, and I
Yeah.
spend the vast majority of my time in the New Testament and then in Genesis. That's where I spend most of my time. And
Yeah.
when I think about Genesis, I always think back to the Adam and Eve story and what was really kind of one of the first commands given to Adam by God in the garden, and it was, "Hey, I created all this. We're co-creating it, but you're the
Yeah.
custodian. You're
Yeah.
responsible for everything
Tend to
here.
tend to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tend to this, you know." And as you were just describing that, I was like, oh, well, that's really being aware of your surroundings. Who can you tend? Who's around you? Who can you, when you were talking about, oh, I might find a college kid who's going and doing his thing, and I want to go build a friendship there because I can help with some mentorship or something like that in
Mm-hmm.
that situation.
Yeah.
And I think about, we shut down and I want to talk about the pain, the bad side of fatherhood for just a minute. And because
Yeah.
we've hinted at it, but I really want to let's pick at it. That selfishness of I can't, I'm not worthy, I don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I think, one of the cruxes of, I think, poor practices in parenting and poor practices for fathers in general. Uh, One of the, I think, the great things that happens uniquely for men is, if you put a weight on a man's back, he will find a way to carry it.
Yep.
And I think one of the disservices that we've allowed for young men in general today in society is we've allowed them not to carry the weight. because we haven't
100%.
said this is your weight to bear.
Yes.
Um, what's your take?
Well, listen, I'll use an example, and I might get in trouble by saying this. I'll say it anyway. So, from my youth ministry experience, we used to take young men into a camp every summer through our church. And the young men who were in fifth grade, they got to be at a special place, kind of up on a hill, in this almost like a fort. Fort is built like with walls, right? And then they got to stay in these different little things, look like a teepee or a wagon. And it's kind of this rite of passage. Like, you're now about to graduate out of this camp, you're going to move on to the next one. Well, one of the traditions was is by surprise, the fourth graders would rush the hill one evening. Well, guess what? The fifth graders knew, and I could be getting wrong. It might have been sixth graders, so don't hold me to it. But they knew that the younger generation of boys was coming. So we prepared like water hoses, water balloons, shaving cream. Like, we were ready. But we knew when we fought and fought and fought, we welcomed them in as now they're now the leaders. It's a rite of passage, right? So we would, my wife being on the nursing staff at this particular camp at the time, would prepare to go, okay, you know what? We're going to need a lot of bandages and they might get hurt and hit their head, but whatever. They're boys, let's go. And at the time, men would be volunteering where they would say, guys, hey, listen, we gotta attack. And they'd set the strategy. We're going to flank them from the left and hit them from the right. And they get to the top and they feel like they're defeated, and we would back off and they would win. We'd all celebrate together and we'd have ice cream. Well, that's a great rite of passage. Like, I put the weight on your back and you get to go up the hill and prove you're a man, a young man. Fast forward a year later, now we have a bunch of moms going, because there's not enough dads to stand up for manhood. It's, well, we need to cancel that tradition, because last year Johnny hit his head and Bobby skinned his knee, and Bobby's mommy got upset because he might have hurt his ankle. And I about lost my lunch. I'm like, what? No, they need to be bruised. They need to get blood on their face. They need to throw dirt on it. I mean, that's just part of being a man, right? We're probably quoting most of John Eldridge's writings, right? And
Right.
in that moment, I had to go, no, we're going to do this. And I'm sure I had women angry at me, and I really don't care, but I want men to be men. And so that's one of those examples where, and I say this, and this is so wrong, but like, we're neutering dudes. Like, come on, man, you've got to put weight on, like you said, and get the job done, right? And I think that's a message directly to dads: is go, don't be fearful of making it a little bit hard. You know what? I'll be honest, being
Mm,
transparent, what I have to do, even with daughters, sometimes I might let them feel a little more pain maybe than they should, like in the decision process or whatever, because I want them to think through before I just give them answers. I mean, I have a deal in business. If one of the people reports to me comes to me with a problem, you better have three solutions, right? Well, I kind of did that with my daughters a little bit. It's like, hey, let's talk through this. Kind of, what are you thinking? Kind of deal.
mhm.
And I think that's specifically to men too. It's like, just don't expect it to be handed to you. I even told men this week at church, I was like, if you're going to choose something hard, you better be prepared for sacrifice and prepared for a whole lot of pain. And there is nothing wrong with pain. Nothing wrong
I
with
think
pain.
it's I think it's really funny because I think if you choose something easy, you're doing the same thing.
What good?
So
What good was it? I mean, it's
yeah,
still good. I shouldn't say that, but man, the painful things is where you serve people more. You go outside your own mental ability, and God steps in and says, "Hey, watch this. Let me show you something." And it's just a
when I
different
was a
mentality.
when I was in college, I used to do I worked with kids mainly. My specialty was really the middle school, high school age. That was just I
Hmm.
was really good with those age kids, and it was a co-ed camp, so both boys and girls, and we did ropes courses. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you what, like we talk a lot about this criticism about rough housing, rough play, rites of passage with young boys. But the truth is this: is that if you're never pushed to the limit, you don't know where it is, and you don't know what you're
100%.
capable of. And
Yep.
that's what confidence is. And confidence is the idea of knowing that, okay, well, I can go to the edge of my known territory.
Hmm.
One of my favorite stories here. Sorry, we'll come back to the story.
Hmm.
You get to the edge and you realize, holy crap, there's more horizon.
There's
I'm
more there.
capable of much more. There's more
Yeah.
there. There's more out here.
Yeah.
When when my daughter was, my eldest was like 5 or 6, we had met a neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
and she wanted to, and the neighbor was a couple houses down, not far at all, but she was young enough where, right, the rules were still don't leave the driveway, don't leave the
Yeah.
yard, don't,
Mm-hmm.
like that was just how old she was. And one day, she's like, hey, can I go play with this friend? And I was like, sure. And then she was like, well, you're going to walk me over? And I said, no. She was like, what do you mean? And I said, come to this window. And at the time, my office window, and I had engineered this very specifically, was I said, see how I can see down the street from this window? Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I will be watching.
Yep. What a
You can
great
go
picture.
knock on the door.
Yeah.
We already have permission. And here was the great thing. This is, I think, the great thing of the story. It wasn't because, yes, the happy ending is she had a new friend. She went and played and all that kind of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Yeah.
moment for me that was the victory, this is the victory moment. She walked to the pass threshold. She walked to the edge of the driveway, and she did that 1 foot lean and looked down the road. She did that
I
1 foot
thought,
lean and looked down the
what am
road
I
and was
about to
like,
do?
all right. Yeah,
Here
exactly.
we
This
go.
is it. And
Yeah.
the thing that made me the most proud, and if you're listening, I'm really proud of you for this. She didn't look back. She knew
Mm.
I was there. She knew I was watching her, and she just kept going.
Yeah.
And then she
And
walked down and she built,
she needed to hear that. She needed to hear that
yeah.
and it's that I love the picture. And you take her to the room. You say, Angel, I want you to see something. Do you see that I can see the front door of that house? Do you see that Daddy can watch you all the way down and back? And your daughter needs to hear, I'm here for you. I've got my eye on you. I care for you. And let's be honest, I mean, from a Christian point of view, that is the idea of the Father watching them, being with them, caring for them, hugging them, right, when they're in pain. But you as a
Mm-hmm.
dad just showed your daughter this is not just how your father is. This is also how the heavenly Father is. And
Mm-hmm.
that's beautiful parenting is what that is, right? Either you're brilliant
Yes.
or lucky. I'm going to go with brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. And now today it's been
Yeah.
it's been a couple of years, and today she walks to her friend's house. That's that's the idea.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to create. That the world is out there, and you know that's it.
Yeah.
Brian, my man, this has been a fantastic conversation. Absolutely dig it. Absolutely love it. I know that Feel
Yes.
Good Fathers are going to really enjoy it. If folks want to get a hold of you and they want to connect with you, see what you're up to, or they want to get your book,
Yeah.
where can they go?
The best thing is on Amazon. Just look for Thriving Girl Dad and you will find it, pop it up. Please grab a copy. My goal with this was to reach one dad, one daughter. God has been gracious. It has reached a whole lot more than that. And I think we're just getting rolling. So grab it, share it, tell other people about it. Because I would love for people to just be inspired by it. That is my goal, to be inspired about it and not just thrive as a dad, just thrive in all that you do and thrive in a way that you impact your daughters, your family, and the next generation. So love for you to have it. I think on Facebook I'm Brian Young 6. That's I should be something that I should know off the top of my head, but I'm out there. You can follow me. I try to be relevant and have fun. But I'm in a new great stage, and so listen, I'm going to share something with the world. When will this be let out to the world? This podcast, because I got to be careful.
A
I'm
couple months, so it'll be soon
okay,
this
so
year.
here I'm gonna share something. I'm gonna lean in and give a secret. I just found out I'm gonna become a granddad.
Whoa!
Don't tell anybody.
Congratulations!
My first. I just got chill bumps. We just found out last weekend, but it's not public,
Oh,
so
that's
don't tell
awesome.
anybody. Okay, don't tell anybody. Dude,
You
this has
got it.
been
I won't tell
fantastic.
anybody.
This has been fantastic, man. I'm grateful that we crossed paths. I'm grateful that you were gracious with your time to invite me on. You have got a mission that is fantastic. It is obviously something that my heartbeat beats for as well. And we just got to help dads step into the role that they're created to be. And that's an amazing father. And they don't have to do it alone, man. What you and I are doing is helping men be inspired. So I'm grateful to you. And let's just keep the conversation going beyond this. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Brian. Brian Young, everybody.
Awesome.